continue to fight for your family. So when you complete your CFC form, remember, AFA's number is 12037. And thank you for your help.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Tropical Storm Debbie has made a second landfall. Anna Arender reporting from Surfside Beach, South Carolina.
Well, good morning. We are feeling the effects of Debbie here. We've got gusts of up to about 30 miles an hour, and I'll say in just these last 15 minutes that we've been on the beach, I am feeling that these winds are much, much stronger. It's clear so far as rain is concerned. The only water I'm really feeling right now is coming from the ocean water behind me, but it's really the wind that is picking up. We're going to see high tide moving forward as we get closer to noon today. So we're going to continue to track the storm here from the coast. But for now, live in Surfside Beach, I'm Anna Arender. Back to you.
It has been more than 2 weeks since Vice President Kamala Harris emerged as the Democratic nominee. And during that time, she has not granted any interviews or held press conferences, setting a new precedent for candidate access to the press in an unprecedented election cycle. GOP strategist Ford O'Donnell says we're not getting any answers from Kamala Harris.
No, we're not getting any answers, and that's actually by design. She's trying to fake her way into being the 47th president of the United States by just not being Joe Biden. And the only way that you're going to get this corrupt media to do their job is for the Trump campaign to schedule as many debates as quickly as possible, because when they see that a lucid Harris is not much better than a diminished Biden, then the floodgates will open and they will ask the questions, and Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
The House Oversight and Accountability Committee has launched an investigation into Vice President Kamala Harris's role in border policy. While Harris and her supporters say she was not the border czar, President Biden did choose Harris to lead the response to border challenges in 2021. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri talked about the investigation on Washington Watch.
This is one of the most catastrophic failures in American history, all the failures at our southern border. And we want to know what's the reason, and who's in charge. Kimberly Cheadle, director of Secret Service, recognized her failures and resigned. And I think that the failures on the southern border are just as egregious, especially when you consider how many Americans have lost their lives at the hands of an illegal immigrant, either through fentanyl poisoning or in direct violent attacks and or rapes and the like. So I think that the American people deserve answers from this administration.
Another business is fleeing California for the Lone Star State. Robert Thornton has this report.
Take me to Texas. Last week, it was announced that Chevron will be moving its headquarters to Texas. The Texas Tribune reports Chevron will relocate to Houston. It's the latest company seeking a more business-friendly regulatory environment in Texas. Last month, Elon Musk said he will move X and SpaceX to Texas. Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Foundation is a former California assemblyman.
Governor Newsom of California and the state in general has had a policy of being very hostile against hydrocarbons, this is oil and natural gas and coal. California doesn't have any coal deposits to speak of, but it does have a lot of oil and natural gas. And what you've been seeing over the last couple of decades is that production of oil and gas in California has been dropping off, somewhat in response to this heavy government hand against the industry.
He said California does lose some in taxes when company headquarters leave and will feel some pain, but the state is so vast the business climate keeps going. DeVore said Occidental Petroleum made a similar move 10 years ago.
And they moved the corporate headquarters out to Houston just like Chevron is doing. They very specifically said that the regulatory environment in California is so unique and so burdensome that they really needed to split their assets off and have a company that could focus solely on doing business in the difficult California business climate. The rest of the company could be unburdened and free to conduct business in Texas.
I'm Robert Thornton.
American Family News is online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Today's Issues, the name of the program, on this Thursday, August the 8th, 2024. Thank you for listening. Joining me in studio here is Ed Battagliano. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Tim.
And Chris Woodward.
Good morning.
And remote from Kansas City, Kansas, is our good friend, Dr. Ray Pritchard. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Tim. How you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Now, outside, which, you know, we older people start talking, you say, how are you doing? First thing you think about is the weather,
That's
right?
exactly right.
Yes,
But it's kind of overcast. We're getting a little respite from the typical
heat.
August heat. How about you guys there?
No, it's you're talking about Ray. I thought you were asking me in the chair right next to you.
Yeah, how are you guys over there? How's the weather over there, Ed?
Ed, how are you doing over there?
Yeah, you're 2 feet from me.
The weather over here is pretty much what it was in Tim. Hey, how's it going where you are, Ray?
Hey, we have had blistering heat, but overnight the rain came, and the high today is going to be only 76, which is that's beautiful for August in Kansas City.
I'm going to Google what time I should expect our tornado based on your unseasonable weather.
Right, it's coming, I'm sure.
All right, so what's your next, when do you got to go out on the road again?
Well, I am, in a couple of weeks, we're going to head to Alabama, then up to Kentucky. A trip is surrounding our wedding anniversary, but then I hit the road to teach the Bible in New York and Florida. About the second week, for a couple of weeks in September, I'll be teaching the book of Galatians up in New York and then down in Florida.
Boy, they need it up there, man.
Oh, I'm telling you. Hey, they need it in Florida. Everybody needs the Bible, right?
Everybody needs the Bible. That's right.
What's the book of Galatians? What stands out about that?
Well, it's about the defense of the gospel. Galatians is about getting the gospel right, because when we are wrong about the gospel, two terrible things happen. Sinners are not saved and God is not glorified. That's a little phrase I say at the beginning of every one of my lectures. We got to get the gospel right, Tim, because if you're wrong about the gospel, you can be right everywhere else. But if you're wrong about the gospel, you're wrong about the most important thing in the universe.
I guess it's kind of like now I don't fly planes myself. I get on planes where other people are flying them. But I've always heard, like J.J. Jasper, he's a pilot, and others, they'll say if you get off, whatever, one degree when you start off, by the time you're in the air for 4 or 5 hours, you are hundreds of miles off course because you started off that 1 degree off. And then the further out you go, the greater the distance from where you should be. So
Ed, that's almost a perfect illustration, because the 1 degree off back in the days of the Galatians 2,000 years ago was circumcision, which people go, what?
Yeah.
What? I don't even understand. So a big part of teaching the book of Galatians is helping people understand how when you are wrong about something that people think, well, it doesn't even matter. You get wrong about that. Pretty soon, some miles down the road, you end up where you didn't want to go. So, again, we got to get the gospel right from the beginning. So, I'll be teaching Galatians next month. Probably the book I've taught around the country and around the world more than any other book of the Bible.
So, are you going to be in New York City or upstate New York?
Upstate New York at Word of Life Bible Institute in Pottersville, New York, and then down at Word of Life, Florida, at the Bible Institute there just north of Tampa.
Pottersville.
Yeah, that's right. Just like that movie, right? Pottersville. Yeah.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the name of the town?
Well, it was the name of the town was Bedford Falls,
Right.
And then Jimmy Stewart, that whole thing about I wish I had never been here, and so the angel, quote unquote, Clarence showed him what Bedford Falls would have been like if he had not been there to stand up to the town bully, I guess you'd say, Mr. Potter. And when he got there, it was called Pottersville. So it just made me think of that when you mentioned it.
All right. Well, we will certainly pray for you, Ray, as you travel and teach the Word of God. All right, Chris, what's our first story this morning?
Well, as we have reported on this show, Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate in this November's election. One of the things that Vice President Harris has claimed for days in an effort to talk up her running mate is that he is, quote, a veteran. Since that time, many people, including service members, have accused Governor Walz of what they call stolen valor. Stolen valor being an instance where somebody claims they were in the military or claims they did things in the military when they, in fact, did not or were not in the military. For example, there is a New York Post article out today, and this is an exclusive with the New York Post. They spoke to a National Guardsman who has branded Tim Walz a coward and a traitor for retiring from the military before his unit was deployed to Iraq. This morning, one of the things that's been trending on X, formerly known as Twitter, is a 2007 clip of then Congressman Tim Walz talking to C-SPAN about his military service. I'll play this clip, and then I'll mention some of the other people weighing in on this issue. Clip 1.
And your military background?
I spent 24 years in the National Guard, some of that full-time. I was an artilleryman. I did Operation Enduring Freedom. My battalion provided base security throughout the European theater from Turkey to England in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. And that same battalion is now in Iraq at this time.
Now, one of the people also accusing Governor Walz of lying about military service is J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee. Yesterday on the campaign trail, he delivered statements to the media claiming Tim Walz is lying about his military service and accusing him of stolen valor. I have some audio. It's going to begin with Governor Walz and then J.D. Vance. Clip 2.
We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
One other thing to point out here, a lot of people are comparing this election in this situation involving Governor Walz to 2004, which feels like 100 years ago at this point, when John Kerry was accused of stolen valor, and you had a bunch of swift boat veterans claiming his comments about what he did in Vietnam were not true. So it's kind of swift boat 2.0, if you will.
Listen, we talked about this in our story meeting this morning. I would not call it stolen valor if Tim Walz had merely gotten out of the National Guard before his unit deployed. You could have you could have a conversation about some people are calling him, like in this New York Post story, that he was cowardly. Okay, that's a separate discussion. The fact that he talked and referred to, Ray, weapons that he carried into war. I think
Right.
J.D. Vance is exactly right. I don't think this problem's going away on Tim Walz. That is a statement you do not need to make. That, to me, is stolen valor. I think it's problematic for Tim Walz.
Well, look, if you talk to veterans around the country, nothing is worse. Nothing is worse in the eyes of veterans than somebody claiming to be in the military who was not, or claiming to have been something in the military, i.e. in combat, when he was not. And I will say that the vets, look, the Trump campaign is going to play this up big time, I think, Ed, as they should, because if you say I carried weapons of war in war, are you not implying you were in the war as a combat
Absolutely.
veteran?
There's no getting away from what he said. Now, if he comes out and says, and Tim, I'm not trying to dominate this conversation, Tim.
That's right, dominate on.
I'm not. If he comes out, Tim Walz comes out and says, "You know what? I was speaking fast, not paying attention to what I was saying, and I did misspeak." And that he may be able to take the edge off this, but at this point, if he doesn't say that, he's got a problem. I think one of many.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we were talking this morning. We're talking about the governor of Minnesota, who is Vice President Harris's choice as her VP running mate, and his military record. And you know, if you claim let's hear that clip again. Do you know when this was from?
Which one are you talking?
The one where he says he carried a gun.
Oh, that's this week at a rally.
Okay. Oh, is that the same one we heard just a minute ago?
The first one we played was 2007, and then the second one with J.D. Vance was in recent days at least.
No, I want to hear the one where that first one we played. Let's play that again.
And your military background? I spent 24 years in the National Guard, some of that full-time. I was an artilleryman. I had Operation Enduring Freedom. My battalion provided base security throughout the European theater from Turkey to England in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. And that same battalion is now in Iraq at this time.
That's from 2007.
That's from 2007 when he was then Congressman Tim Walz of Minnesota.
Okay, that wasn't the one where he says I carried a gun.
That would be number 2.
Okay, go ahead.
We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Well, I wonder, Tim.
Yeah.
No. He needs to answer for that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Because he was unambiguous about that.
Right.
So he needs to, whether he'll have to or not, I don't know. By have to, I mean some kind of is the media going to force him to until he does?
Well, and the problem is the longer it goes. Now you said that was this week at a campaign stop.
Recent days.
Recent days. All right. The longer this goes without him explaining it, the worse it gets, because then it looks like he's trying to put out a fire that's spreading. He ought to come out. I'm not going to. I'm sure he's not listening, but I don't want to give advice to his campaign. But he should say, "Oh yeah, listen, I misspoke. I was never in. I'm proud of my service, but I was never in. I hope you can forgive me. I was in the heat of the moment, wasn't paying attention to what I'm talking about."
Yeah, he needs to do that right away.
But if he doesn't do that immediately, like you're saying, it gets worse for him.
Yeah. All right, you're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Next story, Chris.
Well, military service aside, people are still voicing concerns about Governor Walz supporting things like socialism and even gender manipulation of minors. People maybe have forgotten about this, given the 11 billion other things going on in the news cycle. But Governor Walz, during his time as governor, signed legislation making Minnesota a sanctuary state for minors that want to go there and have therapies or procedures done to go from, for example, a male to a female, as if you can actually do that. I'll share a link to a National Review article here. Minnesota became a sanctuary state for minors that want to go there because their moms or dads or whoever it is won't let them get therapies and surgeries.
So they would they like put them up in a hotel or something? I mean, a sanctuary state means that if the parents aren't supportive of them transitioning, quote unquote, you really can't transition, but in terms of this process, then you're welcome to come to Minnesota. We'll take care of you.
Well, I understood that would be if the parents are good with it, too. In other words, the parents are good. The parents live in Iowa. You can't do this. Let's say
that's a good point.
You live in Iowa. Your parents are saying to the 12-year-old, yeah, we'll have a sex change, operation, and Iowa says you can't do that here.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, we'll just go to Minnesota.
Yeah. All right, I see. That makes sense.
Listen, this fella here, Walz, the governor, he's all in with the whole far left agenda.
Yes.
That I can tell. I've been
unapologetically.
Yes, including the transgendered, the complete transgender movement, including doing surgeries on minors and children. It's just, I can't find anything. I can't find any separation, Ray, between him and anything on the far left.
Well, he is clearly, at least in our lifetime, he is the most radical candidate for president or vice president in our lifetime. You'd have to go back. I don't know. He might be the most radical leftist ever put up for president or vice president.
Outside of maybe Bernie.
Yeah. But I guess, actually running on a national ticket to become a candidate we're going to vote on in a national election, there's nobody to compare to him. He is not just evil. He is transparently evil. He is proudly evil. He boasts about his evil. I'm thinking just the difference between this stolen valor question, because we're all going, well, he needs to come back and apologize. He's never going to apologize for this transgender evil because he's proud of it.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, to your point here, it's not just us thinking that. I've got audio here to Ray's point of him boasting about things like gender-affirming care, his words. Clip 4.
Governor Walz, are you a progressive or are you a centrist?
I'm a progressive. Don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. More police are there, the more tension it is. Protecting and supporting access to gender-affirming health care is essential.
See, he calls it gender-affirming health care, a.k.a. mutilation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We do not call it that at AFN.
It's amazing, Ray, and you guys can chime in too, how these people who advocate for things that clearly are evil, according to the scriptures, right, and just common sense, really,
right,
is that. Go ahead.
Every time we come to discussion like this, and especially now, I'm thinking about the end of Romans chapter 1, the spiral downward. God gave them over, God gave them over, God gave them over. So what's the end of all of this? Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things are worthy of death, they not only continue to do them, but they approve of those who practice them. That's the final stop before the destruction of society. Not only that you do evil, but that you boast about it. You approve of it. You wear it as a badge of honor. And clearly, guys, that's what Tim Walz is doing. He's not just in favor of this protecting the mutilation of children. He is proud of it. He wants people to vote for him on that ground. That's Romans 1 come to life.
Yeah, and the euphemisms is what I call them, that these people use to not have to confront the reality of the evil, so that they can trick a lot of people into believing what's bad or terrible or evil is good, somehow that's virtuous,
right,
is pretty amazing. He called it, what did he call it?
Gender affirming.
Okay, gender affirming. I said it's mutilation. It's child abuse.
Yeah.
That's what it's to take them. It's one thing for an adult to do something like what Caitlyn Jenner, formerly known as Bruce.
Right.
He'll always be Bruce Jenner to me, but
right.
A grown person making a choice that's sad and tragic, and obviously a lot of confusion there. But that's one thing. But to take a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and who's in their formative stages of life and make a life-altering surgery, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On their body, and then do what Tim Walz did there, call it good. He's calling that good. It's affirming.
Yes.
Well, what if next year they want to swap back? Is that affirming?
It's too late.
So you're affirming something that's tragic. That's
and many of these young people do change their minds. That's why we have uncounted people. I hear it's in the hundreds and maybe in the thousands by now of people who regret their quote unquote transition, and they're in mourning of their lost body parts and their inability to have children, and their consistent complaint is, why didn't someone try to stop me? I had parents telling me it was a good thing. I had guidance counselors at school telling me it was a good thing. I had psychiatrists and psychologists telling me it was a good thing. Nobody told me to stop and consider the possible ramifications of it. And, you know, Ray, to your point about approving and applauding and encouraging people to participate in this, I will still never forget, this goes back about 10 years. I still have this video on my computer because I was so stunned by it. It was a mental health professional, quote unquote, from the U.S. government. I want to say it was the National Institutes for Health. I don't remember the lady's name, but I have this video, and it is a sex education video for teenagers. And this woman is saying, I don't know how many of our listeners have ever heard of HPV, the human papillomavirus. This woman is saying, if you're sexually active, you will get human papillomavirus. Everybody has it. You might as well just accept the fact that you will get it and continue to have these kinds of casual sexual encounters. I was stunned by that. This wasn't someone saying, hey, you need to avoid getting sexually transmitted infections. She was saying everyone gets it. You might as well just accept the fact and get a shot or take some pills afterwards, but you're going to get HPV. And I just thought that if that isn't a Romans 1 example like you're talking about, I don't know what is.
Let me give you Romans 1:32 from the Message, because I think it hits home a little better. Eugene Peterson gave it to us this way. And it's not as if they don't know better. They know perfectly well they're spitting in God's face, and they don't care. Worse, they hand out prizes to those who do the worst things best. Friends, that's Tim Walz. That's the radical left. Are we going to take a man like that and put him in as the vice president of our nation? There's a terrifying thought about our future if we put that man in the White House.
Kamala Harris, the current vice president who's running for president, is just as bad as this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, these two are two peas in a pod when it comes to radical.
Right. Yeah, there was a day like Donald Trump picks Mike Pence in 2016. Polar opposites, right? Joe Biden picks Kamala Harris. They're not ideologically the same. For a long time, you've always picked a running mate that's different from you to reach those people that are like, I don't know about this candidate. But these people are literally liberal peas in a pod.
Yeah. Liberal peas in a pod?
Yes. Far left liberal peas in a pod. And it's all plant-based.
All right, let's take our break right here. I think that's a good place. Chris?
Liberal peas in a pod?
Yeah.
That's a good place.
I'm recording it later today on my country album.
End the first segment.
We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
A lady by the name of Ethelwyn Weatherall sat down one day and wrote a little poem. It expresses a beautiful thought that we need. Here's what she wrote. My orders are to fight. Then if I bleed or fail, or strongly win, what matters it? God only doth prevail. The servant craveth naught except to serve with might. I was not told to win or lose. My orders are to fight. It's good to remember that today in the world in which we live. It seems the measure of a person today is not that he fight for what is right, but that he succeed. Success. That's what we all want, and many are willing to pay dearly for. Success. That's what makes a person success. That's what rules the world. Funny how we can take things and twist them to suit us and our conceptions, isn't it? The coach who is the greatest coach today is the one who wins the most games, not the one who teaches sportsmanship and clean play and love of the game. The doctor who is a success today is the one who drives the biggest car and lives in the largest mansion. The businessman who is a success today is the one who can have the biggest store or make the most money off of a product. The politician who is a success today is the one who can get elected the most times to a higher office. Even the preacher of today is not a success unless he serves the largest church. One man, who is counted a failure by the standards of the world, once said that the way to success was to serve. The greatest among you shall be the one who serves the most, he said. And we've taken this and made it imply that we had to win. Win at all cost, win. You are a failure if you do not win. I think we need to go back and get a few things in proper perspective about the faith of the Nazarene. He never once told us that we could expect success as the world measures success. He didn't even hint at it. If anything, we can expect the world to laugh at us and call us crazy and old-fashioned and prudish and stupid and about anything else they can think to call us. But we think we have to win, and this has brought about a damaging attitude of compromise. We can't rid the world of addictive drugs or stop some people from using them, so we make it attractive. We can't rid the world of lust, so let's dress it up and put it in an expensive magazine and put it on the stands for all to buy. We can't keep men from using the name of God in vain, so let's use it in the movies and on the air and in all of our speech. Compromising is one of the deadliest sins of our day. A man by the name of Abraham Lincoln once said it in these words, "I'm not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I'm not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to what light I have. I must stand with anybody that stands right, stand with him while he is right, and part with him when he goes wrong." Is it any wonder we say that he was a great man?
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. Colossians 1:13.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. That's the name of this program. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Battagliano and Chris Woodward and Ray Pritchard. And as always, we thank you for listening. Well, joining us right now is Kirk Cameron, actor and author, and he also reads a lot.
Yes.
Kirk, where are you today, my friend?
Hey, I'm in Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
You still in Mississippi?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here. You there?
If you look at the map, we're right south of you there. Now, you've been, what, you still live in California, though, right?
You know, we moved to Tennessee, so we are no longer California residents, but we go back there often and got some exciting things happening in California. But we have moved east, and now we are residents of Tennessee.
Well, welcome. Welcome.
Thank
Well,
you.
not to
This-
Mississippi,
this
but
is
welcome
part
to
of the country.
welcome to the South. Yeah.
If you like 50 miles an hour, take the Natchez Trace.
He doesn't know what
Okay,
you're
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful.
He
I know
does?
exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, there you go, right there. All right, tell us what you're working on, my friend.
Well, let's see. Last time we talked, we were talking about the fact that I had been writing some children's books that are teaching kids Christian values, and there were librarians who've been infected with the woke mind virus that have denied us access to public libraries because they don't like books about faith, hope, and love. Well, we pushed back and turned these denials into revivals and a national event called See You at the Library, where we had over 306 story hours on one day last summer. This summer, we're doing it again, only we're going to 2X what we did last year. It's called See You at the Library, and it's where thousands of families are gathering at public libraries to pray, to sing the national anthem, and read books of Christian virtue and character to children. There's going to be protests. One group in Huntsville is calling it Kirkpocalypse, which is kind of silly to think of, but it's happening all over the nation. And it's simply parents and grandparents who love God, love their country, love their kids, and they're reading books of Christian character and teaching their children what a great country we live in. So that's happening on August 24th, and we're super excited about it. We want everyone to be involved and to attend one of these story hours.
Now, Kirk, you have, I'm at the website here. All I did was type in "See You at the Library," and it took me to the website at bravebooks.us to get more information. And there's a spot here on the webpage that says register to host a story hour. It may be too late to do that for this.
No, not too late.
It's not. Okay. So what's that process like? What do you mean register to host? What kind of information do you have to give, and et cetera?
Well, what that means is we want to have libraries all over the country singing, praying, and reading books to kids. And if you go to bravebooks.com, you can find out how you can host. You fill out the form, and you can host one of these things at your library, and we'll send you all the instructions. There's even a story hour toolkit that we can send to you to make the event a huge success. Or you can simply look on the map at bravebooks.com and find a story hour near you and join them. You can join them, you can support them, you can invite your friends to attend. And the really cool thing also is that we have invited the Guinness World Records to come to one of these events and document. Guinness World Records showed up to document the world's largest attendance at a drag queen story hour. And they had only 260 people show up. We've had over 3,000 show up at our story hours because America is desperate to get back to the values that lead to our blessing. So we don't know if Guinness will show up, but we know who is going to show up, and that's concerned Christian patriots all across the country. So host an event or show up at an event that's already happening in your area.
Kirk, the reason why I love this approach is, there's an old expression, don't just curse the darkness, light a candle. This is that kind of approach that you've taken. Some bad things were going on. It's fine. I have no problem with protesting those kinds of things and going to the head librarian and saying this is not appropriate for children. All that is fine. And I'm sure there are people doing that, but you also take a more positive, God-honoring, America-strengthening approach and give people something to do.
Yeah. And we understand this principle. It's just hard to do. It's easy to be lazy. It's easy to not get involved and hope and pray that other people are going to fix it. That's not the way that it works. We understand as parents, right, that our children don't get saved apart from the gospel. We have to love them. We have to shepherd their hearts. We have to teach them the truth, or they're not going to get it, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. It takes our involvement. God made it that way. And our nation's not going to get saved, if I could use that terminology. And what I mean by that is, if we want a nation that has a rebirth of good principles, biblical principles, if we want to see a great awakening, a revival in the heart and soul of our nation, in its institutions like the family and the church and civil government, we can't just sit back thinking it's going to happen all on its own. God is sovereign, and he works through the hearts of his people. And so we need to get involved and turn on the lights. That's how darkness flees, is when the lights get turned on, and we are the light turner honors. We're the army of compassion. We're the ambassadors from heaven who are supposed to be salt and light in the culture, not on our couch cursing the darkness.
Kirk, hey, one other question I have for you. Back to California, why are so many people? Elon Musk announced the other day he was pulling another one of his companies out of California, moving them to, I think, Texas. What's going on? Why such an exodus?
Yeah, why the exodus? Because leadership there is turning it into a land. And nobody who runs a business wants to run it out of California, because it's going to be just a dumpster fire, economically, politically, morally, spiritually. And it's a shame, because California, pound for pound, is perhaps the most beautiful state in the country. When you think of the beautiful mountains like Yosemite, and you think of the beautiful beaches, the agricultural land, the natural resources. It's absolutely stunning, and they're destroying it out there. But the good news is there are millions of Christian patriots, even in hurting states like California and Ohio and Minnesota and others, who are standing up, and they are leaning in to things like story hours for kids, taking their kids out of public school and homeschooling them, even being part of this See You at the Library event. And we think that this is a setup for a great comeback of spiritual Christian values in America, and it can only happen through the family of faith. So I have great hope, and I am urging everyone to not sit back and be a professional complainer about the culture. Be an active creator of the culture by showing up and passing the baton to the next generation so that they can have a chance at freedom and blessing.
All right, brother. Thanks for joining us. You got a movie or a TV show or anything like that coming out anytime soon? All right. See ya. We had some technical difficulties. I think we had a better connection from California. Tennessee. I don't know what's happening right there. Here, he must live way out in the country.
I can answer your question a little bit.
But let me just thank Kirk publicly for being on with us. Sorry I couldn't say goodbye to him, but that phone connection was bad. But appreciate him being on with us, and absolutely appreciate his work.
Yeah. I do want to direct our listeners to our Today's Issues Facebook page, because recently, this summer in July, our AFN reporter Bronson Woodruff did a story with Kirk about his leaving California for Tennessee. So that story is on our Today's Issues Facebook page. And to answer your question, Kirk is involved with several new projects, including a new children's TV show, which is called Adventures with Iggy and Mr. Kirk. Again, you can find that on our Today's Issues Facebook page. It was an AFN story for us earlier this year.
All right, you're listening to Today's Issues. Do you have the story about Kamala Harris, the Vice President?
I do.
And her speech yesterday, was it in Detroit?
Yes.
Okay.
They're having a rally, and as is often the case with many things involving Democrats, you have anti-Israel protesters show up to try to raise a stink about things. These are people that are demanding what they want, what they're calling a ceasefire, and to stop Israel's, quote, genocide on the Palestinian people. So what you're going to hear is Kamala's response to this disruption by the anti-Israel protesters, and I'll tell you what some people are saying about her in this response. Clip 5.
You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
Okay, what you have here, again, this is a continuing fight inside the Democrat Party. She's speaking at a rally in Detroit, sort of introducing her campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Michigan, a key battleground state, and she's interrupted. They're saying, Kamala, you can't hide, I think is what they're saying. Something about genocide.
Right.
Right? I can't, could you hear?
The anti-Israel protesters say this administration and the U.S. itself has contributed to the genocide of the Palestinian people by our support of Israel in this conflict or war.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what do you make of her, Ed? We talked about this morning, saying to them, if I'm speaking now, if you want Donald Trump to win, what is she?
Yeah, it sounds to me like she was obviously frustrated at being interrupted. This has got to be a very frustrating thing for the Democratic Party leadership, which she is now the standard bearer as the presidential candidate, to have to consistently deal with these protesters when you have a political speech being made. You're trying to lay out, I'm talking about Vice President Harris's motives here and having these rallies, trying to lay out your vision, as it were, for the country, and you have members of your own party interrupting. I'm sure there's also some fear that at the convention here later this month, the Democratic National Convention, that they're going to have a war over Democratic Party support for Israel. So Harris is responding to that, and apparently she's saying, if you keep interrupting our speeches, or in parentheses, if you interrupt the Democratic Convention with this line of argument, it's going to result in Trump getting reelected. So keep your mouth shut. Let us do the talking, or Trump.
In other words, I'm going to be better for your cause than Trump is. So interrupting me is not doing any good.
Oh, and more than that, interrupting me may sink my chances to win. If you split the Democratic Party but over the issue of Israel, you could reelect Donald Trump. I think that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ray?
Well, I think the thing, Ed, that they fear the most is something happening in Chicago. If you're old enough, and I am old enough to remember what happened in 1968, the Chicago Democratic Convention, what they don't want, Ed, is massive left-wing, pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas rallies in Chicago. I think they have I think choosing Tim Walz largely removed that possibility, but it's always going to be there, right? It is going to be there. So I think she's basically saying, shut up, elect me, and everything's going to be okay.
Well, because it was a very similar situation in 1968. You had Democratic presidents, John F. Kennedy and then Lyndon Baines Johnson, who got the country into the Vietnam War. You had in 1968 a strong Democratic challenge to the Democratic Party establishment to get us out of the Vietnam War. Hubert Humphrey, who was the Democratic nominee, was looking for a way to get them out of the Vietnam War, but you couldn't, as a party, look like you were abandoning the prosecution of that war and abandoning our troops. So you had to kind of say, hey, trust us. We're going to try to work to get us out of the war. But the anti-war people would have none of that. They were passionate about getting out of Vietnam. And in 2024, it's very similar. The Democratic Party establishment cannot come out and say, we are opposed to Israel. We will not support Israel. They're an oppressor regime, and we are now fully in support of the Palestinians. You just can't come out and say that. But these pro-Palestinian protesters, that's what they want. And they're not going to get it. So it could very well turn out in Chicago 2.0.
Look, the pro-Hamas faction, they want Israel destroyed. They want it wiped off the face of the earth, which is why all this talk of a two-state solution is just nonsense. When one, quote, state is devoted to the destruction of the other state, you're never going to have peace in the Middle East. So I expected that we will see more disruptions like we saw yesterday as Kamala Harris goes around the country, and I think we may see it at the Democrat convention too.
Well, I mentioned yesterday that I looked up, Pew Research had a poll out of Democrats. 43% of Democrats do not want the country sending military aid to Israel to use in this war against Hamas. Only 25% of Democrats supported it, supported aid to Israel in its war against Hamas. So that's 43 to 25. I guess the remaining percentages are people who don't have an opinion. But if you've got 43% of delegates to the convention later this month in Chicago who are against supporting Israel, it could turn into a Donnybrook.
Yeah. It's yes, exactly. It could be an embarrassment for their party at their convention in Chicago. You're listening to Today's Issues. Next story, Chris.
Well, let's take a moment, take a break from politics, I should say, to mention a story, and it's on our website, afn.net. I've already shared a link on the Today's Issues Facebook page. A diverse coalition of firms, financial advisors, and thousands of Costco members sent a series of letters this week to Costco, Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, and McKesson, calling on corporate leaders to resist political pressure to begin selling chemical abortion drugs at their pharmacies. Walmart, Costco, for example, they have pharmacies, and you can pick up prescriptions while you're grabbing other things there. Now, the letters were signed by a who's who of people, including Jerry Boyer. Jerry is a proxy voting and corporate engagement consultant that AFA has partnered with on issues involving corporate engagement. Jerry told us that it makes no sense for, in this case, Costco or Walmart, to make a couple $100 on a chemical abortion drug when they could be welcoming a customer for life, buying all sorts of things. You know, if you bring a baby into the world, you got to get diapers, you got to get Pedialyte. Eventually, you're going to have to buy clothing, all these kinds of things. And interestingly enough, AFA actually had a hand in the analysis that Jerry and others put forth to these corporations. Clip 8.
We did a quick analysis. Actually, it was with the help of AFA, the CFO there, Walter Billingsley, where he found that Costco, on average, a customer at Costco is $3,000 a year in revenues. So if you take like one more person, if you analyze, like if you add one more member of the family, that's about $1,200 for each member of the family. So Costco, over 10 years, could have $12,000 in revenues associated with this new person. Or they could kill that person for $200. Now, I'm leaving the morality out of it for a moment. Just as a straight-up financial proposition, you can have $200 now, or you can have $12,000 over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What's the smart financial decision? How in the world can it be for the benefit of the company to kill future customers? There's no way that it can be.
I think that's a brilliant analysis. I mean, and when he's saying kill customers, he's talking about by deciding to provide the abortion drug. I mean, these companies can't say we don't provide that here. I mean, they make choices about which drugs and medications to carry all the time. So what Jerry Newcomb is saying, and hats off to Walter Billingsley, our CFO here, who helped do this analysis, he's rightly saying if you say we're not going to provide that drug, then you are possibly saving the life of a future customer who could spend $12,000 over a decade.
Right. And I will say, too, a lot of people sometimes hear this and they think, well, I don't shop at Costco and I don't do business with Walmart and all kinds of things. We don't have an Albertsons. Insert excuse here. Your 401k probably has money in these companies. And if they're losing money over these kinds of questionable business decisions, your retirement could be in jeopardy if they're going to start losing money because of these kinds of things.
Pretty good idea, Ray.
Okay, so the $3,000, that's what the average Costco member will spend in Costco during a year. Is that what that $3,000?
That was my understanding.
Okay. All right. So yesterday, Marlene and I were in Costco. We spent 10% of our allotment in Costco yesterday. Yeah, and our what our baggage cart, our cart was about half full, and we got 10% of the way there. That's just the way life is. Well, the great thing about this argument, Ed, is it does speak to something. Does Costco care about morality? I doubt it, but they do understand the bottom line. They do understand the power of the dollar. So it's a great argument. It's to their advantage to encourage the birth of more children who could become future Costco customers.
And this part of the whole pro-life argument anyway. If you're dismembering an unborn child in the womb through an abortion, what if that person was going to discover a cure for cancer? Those are the kinds of arguments that are made.
Let me ask you this. I don't know too much about the abortion pill.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, I don't want to get too graphic here. I know we have, nobody wants to hear about this necessarily, but how does that, you buy it over the counter? I mean, how does that work? And what does it do?
It used to be a prescription. Now I think some are selling it over the counter.
Yeah,
right?
There has been a push by the Biden-Harris administration and many Democrats for them to become like an over-the-counter thing everywhere, and you can just go and get it.
But how does it work exactly?
It basically causes a chemical reaction inside the body that terminates the child.
Okay. Do you have to use it before a certain time period?
Yes. A lot of pro-lifers have talked about the abortion pill reversal. I'll post links to all this, too, so people can get information from National Right to Life and whatnot. But pro-abortion people downplay any kind of reversal method. They don't even want it out there.
What do you mean by reversal?
Basically, you can, within a certain amount of time, I'm paraphrasing a lot here, a certain amount of time after you've taken the chemical abortion drug, there is something else you can take to counteract the chemical effects of the first pill.
Well, this is just, you talk about playing God. Now, there used to be what they called a morning after pill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's still available. What is that, RU46?
I believe so.
Okay, and I think that was, you have casual sex with someone, you didn't, quote-unquote, use precautions. I'm sorry, folks, some of this is kind of graphic.
If we don't tell you, you won't know.
Yes. You didn't use precautions. As a woman, you may have gotten pregnant, and so you would take the morning after pill to lessen your chance of becoming pregnant. But there are also, like mifepristone, these pills that after you find out you're pregnant, you can then terminate the pregnancy. But, man, if you're also taking drugs to counteract it, you might still be hurting the baby. This is just a terrible – it's just a terrible thing that technology has been used to produce.
Right, Ray. What does the Bible say about when life begins and when God says life begins?
Psalm 139 makes it completely clear that it is God Himself who knits together the unborn baby in its mother's womb. You were there, Lord. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Who creates life? God does. Who creates the unborn? God does. Who sustains life? God does. And to take away the life of the unborn is an attack on God Himself, because God is the creator of all human life. And so it's as terrible and evil as it can be. And the evil of this abortion pill is that you can kill your unborn baby in the privacy of your own home and no one else will ever know. But it is still evil and it is wrong.
And there's continuity in Psalm 139 because the psalmist David is saying, you knew me when I was in the womb. I didn't suddenly become me when I was born. There was a me in the womb.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break right here. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Steve Paisley-Jordahl will join us in 5 minutes. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
All God asks of you is faithfulness. Headlines in USA Today. Did you see it this morning? All the odds against us. Faithfulness is the word.
There's a place for you on the battle line. Engage in the fight for America's families. Visit afa.net and then take your position. A message from the American Family Association.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A House committee report says a Venezuelan illegal alien with suspected gang ties who was reportedly caught at the border and released into the U.S. has gone on a crime spree in New York City and still will not be deported. Ashley Webster has more.
30-year-old Daniel Martinez has been arrested and released 8 times on 14 charges in New York City. In fact, Martinez's full Homeland Security record reveals that the suspected gang member has committed at least 22 criminal offenses in New York between June and November of last year, including criminal possession of a weapon and assault. Now, records show that U.S. Border Patrol first encountered Martinez in January of 2023 when he was sent straight back to Mexico under President Trump's policy, but he snuck back across the border and has been on a rampage ever since.
Cleanup efforts beginning in parts of South Carolina after Tropical Storm Debbie made landfall on Wednesday. Gene Taylor, a resident of Hugie, South Carolina, says the area has been receiving heavy rain over this past week.
I'm not sure exactly how much rain we've had here. I'm assuming 12 to 15 inches. So, and that's why we've got water in the house.
Debbie is expected to bring heavy rain throughout the Carolinas today and expected to begin moving slowly up the eastern seaboard. At least 6 people have died. One of the 2 men injured during the attempt on former President Donald Trump's life makes a statement. Evan Brown reports.
57-year-old David Dutch was shot twice during the January 13th attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. He's since been released from the hospital, but now through an attorney, Dutch and his family expressed gratitude for Americans who have been sending well wishes since the attack, as well as for police and first responders who saved his life. Dutch was one of 2 people in the rally's audience to survive after being shot. 50-year-old Cory Comparator was killed. The former president survived after being shot in the ear. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Prosecutors allege Hunter Biden was hired by a Romanian businessman for influence.
Court papers allege that a Romanian businessman accused of corruption in his own country hired Hunter Biden during Joe Biden's term as vice president in order to influence U.S. government policy. Prosecutors say a business associate of Hunter Biden is set to testify about the arrangement at Biden's upcoming tax evasion trial in California. Hunter Biden's attorneys have not commented on this specific accusation, but have said in court papers he's been the target of politically motivated attacks and conspiracy theories about his business dealings overseas. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
A voter integrity attorney says Hispanics are tired of open borders and are starting to respond at the ballot box.
Much has been made this election season about polls that show Hispanic voters are increasingly frustrated with the Biden-Harris agenda, including the massive invasion of illegal aliens, many from Spanish-speaking countries. And as a result, many are switching their loyalty to the Republican Party. Jeff Zink is an attorney who has fought for election integrity. He is also the Republican candidate for the 3rd congressional seat in Arizona. He said there were some interesting statistics in the recent Arizona Republican and Democrat primaries in the heavily Hispanic district that includes Phoenix.
What was happening there was 64% of the constituents are Latino, 8% are black, and almost 70% were now voting for the Republican side versus the Democratic side, and they're tired of what the Democrats stand for.
And Zink says their number one complaint is the illegal alien invasion.
Most of the constituents in Congressional District 3 do not want open borders. They want people to come into the country like they did. They left communism from the countries in South America, and they came to America for the American dream.
So Zink says they are supporting candidates who will stand up and say that we need to close the borders. I'm Chad Groening.
American Family News is available online at afn.net. And download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty P.
What we believe about the Bible is based on what we believe about its source.
The God Who Speaks, the award-winning documentary from the American Family Association, is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim, Ed, and Steve Paisley Jordahl joins us in studio. Good morning, Steve.
Hello, everybody.
Ray Pritchard's in Kansas City.
Hey.
So you got the Paisley going on today.
Yes, sir.
Fit your name.
Got a little blue Paisley going on.
Fits the name that you gave him.
I gave him. I've tagged
Yeah.
him with that.
And I'll take it.
Steve, I've tagged Steve.
At least he's not a bird brain. We know that.
It's true.
He's a smart guy.
Steve, I was asking Kirk Cameron last hour. He was on with us. He lived in California, I think a native California, for a long, and he just recently moved to Tennessee, he said, out in the country where he has no good phone cell connection to do an interview with us. But I was asking him, I'll ask you, you're a native Californian. I know you haven't lived there in a long time, but why are so many companies and I guess people exiting California?
Companies are exiting California because it is just a very harsh landscape for businesses. The taxes are so high. California has a lot of anti-growth measures. So if you start a company or bring a company to California, you're going to have a hard time finding housing for your people. It's almost unaffordable. Conservatives are leaving California because the politics are so
hostile.
Yeah, that's why my sister and father and mom and dad left 3 years ago and a lot of people going to Tennessee, to Nashville. That's where they moved. So
that's a good explanation, Steve. I mean, that makes sense. There's both of those things going on.
So
at the same time.
So a lot of people who are conservatives are moving out. Businesses are moving out. That seems to me of course, they're in the minority anyway. But it seems to me, Ray, that's going to worsen things politically in California.
Well, it's just going to solidify the hold that the radical far left has on California. Oh, Tim, we could use another Ronald Reagan. We could use him, but where's he going to come from?
Can you believe Ronald Reagan was a two-time governor of California?
Yeah.
It was a reliably Republican state.
It was a great state back in my youth.
In the era?
When I was in high school.
40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s,
yeah.
right in there.
All of those.
Well, and
I wasn't around in the 40s and 50s and barely in the 60s. I mean, I was.
Yeah, it's just hard to believe that Ronald Reagan was a two-time, one of the more conservative, if not the most conservative president we had.
Now, remember, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat before he became a Republican as well.
But he was governor. He was
governor as a Republican.
This was your granddaddy's Democratic Party back then, though.
Yeah.
So this wasn't.
Well, now Richard Nixon was he? He
was
governor.
Yes.
Was he? He was governor of California. All right.
Yeah, he was governor of
and
California.
then he became vice president for Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. So Richard Nixon. I don't know if there had. I don't know that there have been any. You know if there have been any other governors from California that have become.
When was the last time the
Schwarzenegger
Republicans
was a
carried
Republican.
California? I guess it has to be in.
Oh wow! You mean in the Republican? In a presidential race?
Yeah. Goes back to Reagan, I guess.
I'm going to say Reagan probably. I don't know. Did Bush win? Did George W. Bush, H.W. Bush win California?
No.
But then it would have been. Well, you got it on your screen
I'm
there?
trying here. California went Republican.
Yeah. As we're doing our research.
Yeah.
Right in front of you, folks.
I want to. Well, anyway, as you look that up,
I mean, it's gonna go blue.
I think. Oh
right?
yeah, the Republicans, as far as a presidential election today, are wasting their time and money investing anything in California because there's no shot. There's no shot in New York.
I can't find it this quickly.
Well, can you find anything on Kevin Bacon on there? Maybe who is what he's doing nowadays?
Last time California went Republican presidential.
The last century.
Yeah, see if you can get that. Is it comes up or no?
Nixon was not governor of California.
What was he in California?
He's in Congress.
He might have been. Yeah, I think he was in Congress.
Oh, Richard Nixon was not governor.
Yeah,
California.
Earl Warren was governor till.
I'm giving misinformation out.
Goodwood Knight.
Somebody needs to cancel me.
Pat Brown, then Ronald Reagan, then Jerry Brown, then Duke Majan, Wilson, Davis, Schwarzenegger, Jerry Brown again, and now Gavin Newsom.
Well, my apologies. My history's usually right, but I got that one wrong. I thought Richard Milhouse.
Milhouse. He was in Congress.
Okay, now good old Wikipedia has got it. So California, Democrat. I'm going backwards. George H.W. Bush in 1988.
He did win
California.
Okay.
Yeah, but after that, it's all been Democrat.
And,
yes.
and they have they put rules in place. They have a lot of these jungle primaries now where it's the top.
In Los Angeles?
All over the
Bada
state.
boom.
Yeah.
You see what it did there?
Yeah.
All over the state. So what you have is instead of running a Republican against a Democrat, they just take the top 3 or 2 vote getters in any race and run them against each other. So a lot of times you have Democrat running against Democrat. Republicans don't even have anybody in the race. They are way outnumbered in the Assembly and in the Senate. They haven't had the governor's office in a while. They are essentially a permanent underdog party in California.
And as I said, just as we started this conversation, it's only going to get worse because a lot of conservatives and Christians are leaving California because of the hostile nature of the state government against them.
It is a good petri dish, though, to see what's going to happen if you give in completely to the ultra-left, because that's what's ruling in California. And California, look at San Francisco. It's a mess right now.
I was reading a story the other day about, could you wonder about national politics? Well, really politics, local and national, Ray. And the story was we don't really have, it's kind of a misnomer to say we have blue states. What we have is blue cities.
Right.
Who run red states.
Right.
Uh-huh. Okay. You used to live in Illinois, Chicago.
Right. Yeah, Chicago. She's got deep blue and millions of people. You move downstate. The further away you get from Chicago, going down south, southern Illinois, the redder the state gets. So you have deep blue city, and it controls the rest of the state, even though there are hundreds of thousands of people in Illinois who are actually quite conservative. But how do you overcome the numbers in the city of Chicago?
By the way, that is the argument for the Electoral College, is that there's disproportionate amount of representation in large cities.
Well, they are people, and they
are,
they
they each deserve a vote. But if you didn't have the Electoral College, and it was just a popular vote, if you go to 5 cities that have 3 million people in them, you know how many times?
Oh, you're saying that was the original reason for the Electoral College?
Yeah,
to help balance things out between rural and city.
If you could hit 9 million people in 3 cities, do you know how many county fairs it would take to hit 9 million people? Why would you even bother?
Well, also take California for example. Los Angeles and San Francisco, the top 2 most populated areas, the Bay Area, the Los Angeles area, heavily blue. Mm-hmm. Well, but in the middle of the state there, and some in Orange County and San Diego, there's red.
In Northern
people
California.
Who vote. So now that's why, if you want to know why Georgia is now considered a, quote, purple state or swing state, It's because the growth of Atlanta. And Atlanta's becoming like Chicago South, in terms of their dominance over and their influencing state politics.
It's also, I think, a part of the issue in the change within Atlanta, Fulton County, et cetera. It's almost like what happened in Northern Virginia. Atlanta is becoming kind of an international city in terms of people moving there either from other liberal bastions around the country, but also from other parts of the world. And when you get that, you lose some of the conservatism that typically marked Georgia.
You just gave another example, Virginia.
Yeah.
Virginia is a red state with the exception of the hugely populated
Beltway.
Northern Virginia area, which is basically a suburbs of Washington, D.C. in a way. They vote heavily blue, and you got Richmond, maybe somewhere around Richmond. But other than that, it's a red state, and it was traditionally so.
I got a question for you guys, any of the three of you. Why do Democrats gather together in blue states, or in blue cities, and Republicans?
All right, I read about this too. I'm a well-read man. And this is a theory, and Ed could probably back me up, having lived in the Boston area, but and lived in some big cities. A lot of your big cities, especially in the north and out west, they are very pro-union. All right, heavily pro-union, and union folks vote for however their bosses that are their leaders tell them to vote, right? Basically, that they stick together as a block, and so they vote Democrat. The unions have always been hand in hand with the Democratic Party. Tell me if I'm saying something wrong here, and so that emanates out across a big city like New York or Boston or Chicago or Los Angeles, where your friends and your family, everybody knows you vote your self-interest. Your self-interest, and who doesn't? A lot of people vote their self-interest. It's not necessarily something inherently wrong with that, but they vote their self-interest being higher pay or whatever, because their union is going to get them that. Well, their union is going to get them that because they control the Democrat Party, which is the majority. You see how this works?
So the factories in the large cities, the workers are in the large cities, the unions are in the large cities.
Yes. Now, yes.
Universities.
Now,
the same thing goes with universities.
Now, one other addendum to that point, and you guys can feel free to see if you've outread me. One other point on that is that this explains why you may say, well, you may say to yourself, I just don't believe all those factory workers are all that flaming liberal. There's got to be some moderate to conservatives. I mean, there's a lot of, people who go to church and they're family people. They care about their communities. How could they be so socialistic or so liberal? Or maybe they're pro-life. They're pro-life, but when it comes to voting, they vote Democrat. Why do they vote Democrat? For the reasons I gave to you earlier, which takes preeminence over every other issue that might come along. Now, that changes from time to time. I mean, it's up to each individual, but by and large, you think I've got it there?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the factors. One of the things I also, what Steve said in terms of Boston, for example, a lot of colleges and universities, but also for cities like Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago. I was looking up to get some numbers here. The Great Migration, a lot of times people forget this from our history, but between 1910 and the 1970s, 6 million black people moved from the American South to big cities up north. One, to get away from Jim Crow laws down here, and two, to find jobs. A lot of black farmers had their farms taken from them through different bank policies, and so they couldn't support their families. So they all moved to these big cities. That's why there are huge black populations, percentage-wise, in these big cities, and they went there to get jobs, and then they worked in factories, like you're saying. A lot of them became union members. So that's why when you say, well, why are there so many black people in Detroit, for example? Well, that's from that great migration. So there are a number of factors. The union factor is huge because a lot of these northern states especially you had to belong to unions in certain occupations. And these factories and when you're making cars, all the automobile manufacturing plants, all heavily unionized, and the unions went Democrat.
It's the same way with the black community, if you want to call it, quote, the black vote, okay? By that I mean they vote 90% Democrat. Black folks do. Well, why is that? I know they're not all that liberal. Huh? I know, you know what I'm saying? They're not as liberal as the party.
Yeah.
But yet they often end up voting for the party, the Democrats, because they have done that since the 60s.
Habit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because the Civil Rights Act that was, well,
that and
if they attribute that to
and all the social services that the Democrats promised them.
Right. So that often overrides, and the false caricature and stereotype, I think, of Republicans, i.e., the party of the rich white guy. You know what I'm saying? And listen, you don't have half the country being rich white guys.
Right.
Half the country being the ones that half the vote Republican, half vote Democrat, I'm saying. But it's the stereotype that is reinforced every election cycle. But you know, a lot of Hispanics traditionally are probably the most conservative on social and moral and family issues than any other ethnic group, and yet they still vote 60% Democrat, 40% Republican. Now they would probably, a lot of these folks would probably, if they could quote push back against what I'm saying, they might say, well, yeah, because Republicans are cutting off welfare to poor people. That's not very Christian, Tim.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? This is the kind of response you would get back from people who would otherwise agree with us on maybe social issues.
Yeah.
So is that fair?
Yeah. No. People vote for complex reasons sometimes. Ray, I guess we can let you jump in too. They vote for complex issues, and probably most people vote first and foremost on the kitchen table and their pocketbook. And really, it's only been since the 80s where a lot of these social issues, the late 70s, with the moral majority, where social issues became so front and center for a lot of Christians. So a lot of people just voted on their economic self-interest. Ray, it's complicated, I think.
I was thinking about the city of Chicago. Okay, for the better part of a century, the machine, the Democratic machine, which, Tim, you rightly said, is tied right in with the labor unions, in the city of Chicago, they have controlled the mayor's office. And I think about Old Man Daley. He was a terrific mayor by a lot of standards. I don't know that he could be elected today in Chicago because the Democratic Party nationally and in Chicago, they have just moved further and further and further to the left. Old Man Daley was an old school Democrat, and you were talking about that a little bit ago. So is there a Republican Party in Chicago? Yeah. They have a few seats. Yeah. Is there a conceivable way in which a conservative Republican could win the mayorship of Chicago today? I don't think there's any conceivable way because the system itself is stacked. It's controlled, Tim, by the Democrats. They control it. They make the rules.
You know, we all know that the MAGAs tried to start a movement there and they tried to recruit Jesse Smollett. You know what I'm saying? To join them, to start a MAGA chapter in Chicago.
That's MAGA country, baby.
It went bad. We all know what happened there. It went bad there. But, your big cities are they're for the foreseeable future, at least, they're going to remain Democrat. And I think the other thing is, as I've mentioned here before, you're talking about why people vote the way they do. everybody has their reasons for why they vote for who they vote for. And in today's media-driven world, and with the internet out there and social media and everything like that, a lot of folks vote with their emotions. And, you know, at least that's a big factor. In what do you agree with that? Or I think,
yeah, I think that
that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, altogether,
Right.
we have emotions, but people vote for them, which override. I've interrupted you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. And believe me, I hear from our listeners.
Well, and that's why I think it's exactly right, and that's why a lot of campaign ads are emotionally driven. They're appealing to the emotions. So you see a lot of imagery. You will hear some words, but you have things flashing up on screen, and you're trying to speak to the emotions of the voter to try to get them to vote your way. And I think that's just part of the psychology of campaign ads proves that.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that, Ray? People voting with their feelings and emotions sometimes?
You know, in Chicago, they voted sometimes because, you know, he promised that my trash would get picked up on time and nothing else really mattered, right?
Yeah.
And I voted 3 times.
Some of them in Chicago voted it because their embalmer told her to vote.
That's
told
exactly
her to vote
right.
For it.
Hey, before we get done, and we may have time to slip something humorous in, folks, we have neglected, yes, I said neglected to mention that this is National Truth for Youth Bible Week here on American Family Radio. We're asking you to help us give away thousands of free Bibles to young people across America. Now, we're talking about how to turn this country around. We want to begin with the gospel, and we want to begin with the power of God's word. So how do we get the Bible into the hands of high school students? Well, you know what? I can't walk in to a high school and hand out Bibles to students, but other students can. And that's what the National Truth for Youth Bible Week is all about. And so AFR has partnered with, you had Tim Todd on here on Monday, has partnered with, guys, help me out here. I can't remember the name of his ministry. Revival Fires Ministry. You guys aren't even paying attention. Revival Fires Ministry, Revival Fires International. We're partnering with Tim Todd. He produces these Bibles at his cost and will give them to any high school student who promises
or
give
junior high
free, or junior high, who promises to give it to an unsaved student in your junior high or your high school. How do you get those? Parents, you're the ones probably listening, grandparents. If you have teenagers who will do this, who will hand them out, you can get a free Bible, one free Bible for every kid you have in your home, or grandparents in your grandkids' homes. And this is how you do it. You can call. This call will go right to Revival Fires Ministries. They have people waiting there to take these calls. 844-530-8890. That's 844-530-8890. Or you can go online anytime at tfy.org. tfy.org. That stands for Truth for Youth. And you can get a free Bible if you promise to give this away. You call between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. 844-530-8890.
I have been paying attention to you, Ed, the
Thank
whole
you.
time.
Hey.
But I think you should end with telling people about the Truth for Youth Bible Week.
Yes. And by the way, these Bibles are the New Testament with 100 pages of comics on a variety of important issues, and they are very well done. Kids will pay attention to these, and it's a way to get kids to read the Bible. So you can go to afr.net and get more information on this very worthwhile project.
Thank you, Ray.
You bet. Thank you, Tim.
Appreciate Ed and Steve and Brent Quealy, our producer, and Christopher Woodward. Fred's away this week.
In Canada.
The Canadian will be back Monday. He's gonna migrate south.
It's about time. When it goes away, things happen, so we want him back.
Trivia Friday tomorrow. We'll see you then.
You know, there are many ways we can impact the world around us. Some are more direct, like helping our neighbors and serving in our churches. Other ways are broad, like becoming community leaders or supporting missions. Of course, taking care of our family